This is the Miami Dolphins instant reaction for Game 10 of the 2022 NFL season against the Cleveland Browns. Yes, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, the Dolphins are now 7-3 as they come away with a thrilling 39-17 victory over the lowly Browns, who had Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, as Deshaun Watson is still one game away from being allowed to play. And I'm kind of glad he didn't play in this game, because the story would have been all about the Deshaun Watson situation and how the Dolphins were trying for so long to replace our quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, with Deshaun Watson. Or should I say Brian Flores and company were. But anyway, that's a different story. Let's talk about the stuff that happened in this game, stats, facts, and more. And the Dolphins would be led by Tua Tagovailoa passing, who would go 25 out of 32. He would get 285 yards total, going 8.9 yards per pass, throwing for 3 touchdowns, finishing with a QBR of 94.9 and an overall passer rating of 135.0. Skylar Thompson would actually come into the game later on in this game, as by the time the Dolphins had pretty much put this one to bed, Skylar Thompson came out. He only had one pass, but that pass would go for 17 yards, and he would finish with a 90.9 QBR and an 118.8 passer rating. The Browns would be led by former Dolphin Jacoby Brissett, who would finish the game 22 out of 35, throwing for 212 yards with an average of 6.1 yards per pass, throwing for a touchdown, getting sacked 3 times, losing 27 yards, finishing with a QBR rating of 58.6 and an overall passer rating of 89.2. The Dolphins would be led in rushing by Jeff Wilson, who would have a standout performance in this game. He would rush the ball 17 times for a total of 119 yards, 7 yards per carry average, scoring a touchdown with a long of 20 yards. Raheem Mostert would go 8 carries for 65 yards, getting 8.1 yards per carry with a touchdown run and going for a long of 24 yards. The Browns would be led by Nick Chubb, who would gain 63 yards on 11 carries. However, 33 of those were on his touchdown run, which is why his average is 5.7 yards per carry. Jacoby Brissett, though, would get 7 carries, going for 40 yards, going for a long of 14 yards. Kareem Hunt, you would have expected Kareem Hunt to have more of an impact in this game, but he only had 6 carries for 9 yards with a 1.5 yards per carry average. His long of the day was 7 yards. In the receiving end for the Dolphins, it was a pretty well-rounded performance for multiple Miami Dolphins receivers, I might say. Jalen Waddle would get 4 receptions for 66 yards, averaging 16.5 per reception. He had 5 total targets, receiving 4 of those, and his long of the day was 29 yards. Trent Sherfield would come in second in terms of yards. He would have 4 receptions for 63 yards, averaging 15.8 yards per reception. He would get a touchdown along with off of those 5 targets that he received, going for a long of 27 yards. Alec Ingold would come in at third. He would also get a touchdown pass, or a touchdown reception, rather. He would go for 45 yards. Tyreek Hill would be the other guy who also caught a touchdown pass. He had 5 receptions, 44 yards off of 6 targets. For the Browns would be led by Donovan Peoples-Jones, who would get 5 receptions off of 9 total targets. He would go for 99 yards, averaging 19.8 yards per reception, going for a long of 38 yards. Amari Cooper was pretty much silenced in this game, although he did leave or seemed to have some type of an injury issue. He would have only 3 receptions off of 3 targets for 32 yards, averaging 10.7 yards per reception. His long of the day was 12 yards. The lone touchdown reception for the Browns was by Harrison Bryant, who would have 3 receptions off of 3 targets, going for 15 yards. The long of the day, 12 yards. Turnover-wise, there was all kinds of fumbling happening throughout this game. Overall, though, there was only 1 lost fumble for the Cleveland Browns, and that was by Nick Chubb, and there were none for the Miami Dolphins. However, Xavier Howard recovered the Nick Chubb fumble. Defensively, the Dolphins were led once again by Elandon Roberts, who had 7 total tackles, 6 of them solo, followed by Justin Bethel, who had a great game today. He had 7 total tackles, 5 of them solo, and Jerome Baker would come in a close third, 7 tackles, 4 of them solo. This game would have a total of 3 sacks by the Miami Dolphins, one of them going to Christian Wilkins, who's having an all-pro season, I must say. The second one going to Melvin Ingram, and then the third split between Jalen Phillips and newcomer Bradley Chubb, who would split that sack. Overall, there would be those 3 tackles, those 3 sacks, along with 3 tackles for loss. And then you also had a total of 8 passes defensed by Miami Dolphins defenders. Now, in terms of quarterback hits, though, that was one thing that stood out to me. The Dolphins got a total of 14 quarterback hits, 3 of those by Christian Wilkins. We had 2 by Zach Sealer. Bradley Chubb also had 3 quarterback hits. Melvin Ingram had 3 quarterback hits. Jalen Phillips had another 2. And I think here, Elandon Roberts was the other guy who also landed a quarterback hit. Now, for the Cleveland Browns defensive team, they were led by Sione Takitaki. I could say that a million times. Sione Takitaki. He had 10 total tackles, 8 of them solo, along with a tackle for loss. He would be followed by the former LSU man, Grant Delpit. He would have 10 total tackles, 6 of them solo, along with a tackle for loss. And then you also had Denzel Ward, who had 8 total tackles, 6 of them solo, and a pass defense. The Cleveland Browns defense would have 1 sack, and that lone sack would be split between 2 guys, Deion Jones and Greg Newsome. The Cleveland Browns defense would have a total of 3 pass defense, and I gotta say, the Miami Dolphins offensive linemen did a great job protecting Tua because they only landed 2 quarterback hits on him. And you know, when Tua has the protection he needs, and also when he's getting rid of the ball quick, good things are bound to happen. Now, when it comes to special teams, we didn't really have anything crazy when it comes to kick returns, although Jerome Ford did have a 48-yard kick return. But besides that, there were no punt returns because there was no punting. The Miami Dolphins did not punt once in this game. I can't remember the last time I saw that. However, the kicking game continues to be a struggle for this Dolphins team. Jason Sanders would not miss a field goal. He would go 2 for 2, but he would miss 2 extra points, going a total of 3 for 5 in this game. Cade York, on the other hand, the Cleveland kicker, would go 1 for 1, which was a 37-yarder, and he would go 2 for 2 from extra point land. Corey Bojorquez would punt it once, and that punt would go 41 yards. Let's talk about how this game started and ended and all the specifics behind it as a whole. The Cleveland Browns would start this game on a positive as they would open up the scoring in the first quarter. On their first drive, they would go 4 plays, 53 yards in 2 minutes and 47 seconds. And they would open, and this drive would end on a Harrison Bryant 1-yard touchdown pass from Jacoby Brissett, which was set up by a couple of interesting plays here. We had, in the beginning, the first play of this drive was a Jacoby Brissett pass deep left to Donovan Peoples-Jones that went from the Cleveland 47-yard line to the Miami Dolphins 15-yard line, which was a total of 38 yards. And mind you, this is right after the 48-yard kick return by Jerome Ford. Kick return game seems to be and continues to be a concern for the Miami Dolphins, or the kicking coverage, I must say. Besides that 38-yard play, there wasn't much happening besides we had a offside neutral zone infraction by Emmanuel Agba, and that would be off of a 3rd and 4 play. So that essentially gave the Browns a first down on a 3rd and 4 from the Miami Dolphins 9-yard line. After that opening touchdown by the Browns, the Dolphins would start their first possession of the game, going 10 plays, 84 yards, taking 6 minutes off the clock, and this drive would culminate on a 13-yard touchdown pass to the fullback, Alec Ingold. This drive had a few plays that were key, but for the most part, they were somewhat medium to lower chunk plays in terms of yardage gained. But the one that stood out was a Tua Tagovailoa pass to Trent Sherfield that was from the Miami 40 that ended on the Cleveland 42, which was for 18, or went for 18 yards. And that was followed up by a Jeff Wilson run up the middle for 18 yards, culminating to the Cleveland 24-yard line. And he would, after those 18 yards, he would go 11 yards right after that, and that would kind of set up the tone for the game, as Jeff Wilson pretty much had his way with the Cleveland Browns defenders. The Dolphins would then tie the game after that drive, and it would be 7-7. The following drive for the Cleveland Browns would go 12 plays, 44 yards, taking 6 minutes off the clock, but would end on a Nick Chubb fumble, which happened on the Miami Dolphins 34-yard line with 20 seconds left in the first quarter off of a 2nd and 10 play. Nick Chubb would rush right, and as he went right, he would fumble, and that fumble was caused by Zach Steeler, and it was recovered by Xavier Howard at the Miami 29. The Dolphins would then take over, and they would go 9 plays for a total of 50 yards, taking 4 minutes and 8 seconds off the clock. And this would culminate in a 39-yard field goal by Jason Sanders. It's important to note, however, that in this game, Tua did not get sacked, but Cedric Wilson did, as there was a pass attempt which was on a 1st and 10 play from the Cleveland 25-yard line, in which Cedric Wilson was sacked for 6 yards at the Cleveland 31-yard line. This would essentially end any opportunity for the Dolphins to be able to do something with this drive, hence settling for the field goal. At this point, the Browns would then take over, and they would go 9 plays, 33 yards, taking a total of 5 minutes and 30 seconds, but would end on the Miami Dolphins 42-yard line, as the Browns went for it on a 4th and 3, and Jacoby Brissett's pass to Donovan Peoples-Jones was incomplete, which was defended by Kader Kahu and Bradley Chubb. Now the Dolphins pulled the classic anything you can do, I can do better on the next drive. 7 plays, 43 yards for a total of 3 minutes and 27 seconds. And they also would turn the ball over on downs, as on a 4th and 1, Jeff Wilson. And this also has been an interesting dynamic with the Dolphins, where these short yardage situations tend to be extremely difficult for them to complete or to convert. Jeff Wilson would go up the middle, and he would lose a yard. Luckily, though, on the following drive for the Browns, it would go 4 plays for a total of 5 yards and 46 seconds, and would culminate right after a Jacoby Brissett sack by Christian Wilkins and Melvin Ingram. That sack was on a 3rd and 6 from the Cleveland 31-yard line, and that was the one in which Christian Wilkins and Melvin Ingram tag team and would essentially end up with a 4th and 17 from the Cleveland 20, in which Bojorquez would punt it 41 yards to the Miami 39-yard line. The Dolphins would take over with a minute and 22 seconds left, and they would score a touchdown on a 7-play, 53-yard drive that would only take 50 seconds to complete. And that was a pass that was 14 yards to Trent Sherfield, which went for a touchdown. The Dolphins in this drive would have a couple of chunk plays that helped them set themselves up for this touchdown pass. On a 2nd and 5 play from the Cleveland 48, with a minute and 1 second left in the second quarter, Tua would pass to Mike Gesicki, who would run out of bounds to the Cleveland 33 for 15 yards. After that, we had a short pass to Jalen Waddle that went for 7 yards, another short pass to Raheem Mostert, which went for 8 yards, and that would set up from the Cleveland 14, the 14-yard touchdown pass to Trent Sherfield, which would give the Dolphins a 17-7 lead going into the final play of the first half. And that final play, after the Jason Sanders touchback kick off of the kickoff, Jacoby Brissett would pass it short left to the Cleveland 27 to Bell for 10 yards. There was a penalty on Jedrick Wills for holding, which caused them to have to redo the play. The following play, Kareem Hunt would go right for 7 yards, and there was another penalty, this time against newcomer Jack Conklin, offensive holding. Finally, Cleveland was just like, all right, we just had 2 straight penalties. Let's just go ahead and kneel it. And that was the end of the first half, with the Dolphins up 17-7. At the start of the second half, the Dolphins would go 6 plays for 70 yards, and they would score a touchdown, taking the lead, or extending the lead, rather, to 24-7. This was a 6-play, 70-yard drive that lasted 3 minutes and 25 seconds, culminating on a 25-yard rush by Raheem Mostert. In this drive, we had a 16-yard pass to Mike Gesicki. We had a 9-yard pass to Alec Ingold, and then we also had a 14-yard pass to Jeff Wilson. And that's what helped set up the 24-yard rush by Raheem Mostert, which would take the lead to 24-7. The following drive for the Browns would go 11 plays, 56 yards, 4 minutes and 39 seconds, and would end in a Cade York field goal from the Miami 19-yard line, a 37-yard field goal to be exact. After that Cade York field goal, the Dolphins would then, on their next possession, go 13 plays, 77 yards, and this was essentially the drive that put the game to bed. This drive took 6 minutes and 19 seconds and would culminate on a 2-yard touchdown pass to Tyreek Hill by Tua Tagovailoa. We had multiple key plays in this drive, the first of which was a 3rd and 10 play from the Miami 23-yard line. And Tua, who's having a great year when it comes to these 3rd and long situations, Tua would find Jalen Waddle to the Miami 38-yard line for 15 yards. Later in the drive, on a 2nd and 2 from the Miami 46, with 5 minutes and 24 seconds left in the third quarter, Tua would find Tyreek Hill, who would go for 16 yards, taking the ball to the Cleveland 38. Besides that, there was a couple of more chunk plays, both small to intermediate, and it would culminate, as we said, in the 2-yard touchdown pass from Tua to Tyreek Hill. It's worth noting that this is one of the extra point attempts that Jason Sanders would, in fact, miss. The following drive for the Cleveland Browns would go 7 plays, 76 yards, taking 2 minutes and 28 seconds off the clock, and would culminate in a touchdown by Nick Chubb, who would take the ball 33 yards. And this was almost half of all of the rushing yards that Nick Chubb would have in the game. The extra point was good, and it would set up the Dolphins to try to push back any momentum that was starting to swing, or that was trying to swing in favor of the Cleveland Browns. The following drive for the Dolphins would be a 9-play, 60-yard drive that would take 4 minutes and 54 seconds and would culminate on a Jason Sanders field goal. This field goal was for 33 yards. At this point, the score is 33-17. Ensuing possession for the Browns would go 4 plays, losing 5 yards, a minute and taking a minute and 2 seconds off the clock, followed by a Miami Dolphins 20-yard touchdown run that would also include a Jason Sanders mixed extra point. Right after that, the game was pretty much over. The Browns would take over, and they would have an 11-play, 39-yard. That's a lot of plays for so little yards, I tell you that. 11 plays, 39 yards, taking 3 minutes and 2 seconds off the clock. And this would end on a 4th and 20 pass, incomplete, that was intended towards the receiver, Bell. And at that point, the Dolphins would take over. Skylar Thompson would come into the game, along with Savon Ahmed, and they would just pretty much do dink and dunk, stat padding type plays until it got to the point where, okay, let's go ahead and take a knee. And that was pretty much the end of it. So overall, this game is kind of a microcosm of what the Dolphins have been this year. You'll have your moments where the Dolphins would be or look invincible. There'll be moments where the Dolphins look like they are lost or simply execution will fail them. And then there'll be moments that just make no sense. But overall, the important thing is the Dolphins are setting themselves up for a potential postseason appearance. As right now, as it stands, the Dolphins are 7-3. 7-3, ladies and gentlemen. Last year at this point, we were at the opposite end of the spectrum. I believe at this point we would have been 3-7, about to face the Ravens. And I remember last year we had a huge run in the end of the season after starting so terribly in the beginning. Let's hope that the Dolphins can continue this ride towards the end of this season, as it's going to be crucial for the Phins to continue to ride this momentum and continue putting themselves in the position to make a postseason appearance, their first since 2016. This has been the Miami Dolphins instant reaction for the 2022 season in the game that was the Dolphins versus the Browns. The Dolphins 39, the Browns 17. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you continue to listen to us, and I hope that you continue to be a listener, and we look forward to seeing you soon as we look forward to recapping another Dolphins victory against the Houston Texans. See you next time.